I do want to ask a question.
Okay.
Every podcast we ask, we have Monroe's random question. Uh, and my question to you, if you could think about it, is who is the just freakiest athlete that you've ever had? I would say train. You've probably trained plenty of awesome people, but or just been around. Maybe it was a person on a different team where you were just like, holy crap, just blew your mind. Freaky athlete.
Present company excluded.
Oh
You don't
man.
have to think about
Yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think, man, I mean, Coach Max Crosby came in as a 200-pound string bean when he got to campus, but his motor was on another level. Um, we had obviously some creatures at Washington last year. I think Jason Pierre-Paul is probably the one that is the freakiest athlete that I've coached. I saw him and I begged him. Like I begged him. I told him I would pay him money. I begged him to instead of run the 40, he did at our bowl game. He's 6'5", 265 pounds, and he did back handsprings all the way across. He did it all the way across the field and back to the opposite hash without stopping. And I begged him instead of running the 40 to just do back handsprings down the 40, and it would have been like still talked about to this day,
Yeah.
but he didn't do it, and he was a freak. I mean, being in the NFL, like Calvin Johnson, I was stretching a guy, before our game against uh, them, and he comes running by, and you're just like, holy crap, that's a dude now. But yeah, I mean, Geno Atkins, freaking Warren Sapp, John Lynch, Derek Brooks. I mean, I can go on and on.
yeah, yeah. So track was my sport. I wasn't ever a football player. They wouldn't let me play because I was all messed up. I couldn't pass a physical, but my track coach didn't care. He was like, "Yeah, you can throw shot put. Let's go do it." But I remember at one meet, and I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name right now. I'm sure I'll remember in 20 minutes and blurt it out. But we were at a meet, and they announced it was time to warm up for shot put. He was sitting in the bleachers, like the front row of the bleachers. From sitting in the bleachers, he jumped over the guardrail and down into the stadium, and it was like a 15-foot fall,
Just
and just popped up and walked over to throw shot put. And he was like, again, 6'8", 350 pounds maybe, like just a massive, massive dude. I remember seeing that and being like, oh yeah, there's levels. There's levels to this game
levels.
for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, everybody there at the trial is obviously awesome, but
Uh,
just different. Yeah, mine would probably, I guess, the most impressive person I've been around would be Ed Cohen, powerlifter,
yeah,
like
yeah,
real popular in the '90s, like
yeah,
2450 total or something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But I obviously didn't train him. I actually just walked by, went to say something to him, and then just was like, I can't say anything to this man, and walked away. I'm not strong enough
Probably
to
right,
talk to that
Mo.
guy. But yeah, if you, unless I would love to jump in and talk about kind of the three questions because that was
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
I think it was 2 years ago that I came and saw you, and that really kind of changed the way that I thought about the weight room as like a holistic, like year round thing instead of just being a thing that the kids did. Like it really changed the way that I thought about the weight room. So just talk a little bit about the why and introduce the three questions that you have with the kids. I think it would be a great thing for everybody to hear if they haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to is just, we have I call it a why meeting now. It wasn't until I read the Simon Sinek Start With Why book, several years later. But um, basically, in that he has the golden circle, right? You got to know the how and the what before or you got to know the why before you can determine the how and the what. And I thought that was great, but like, it's hard to get to somebody's why. If I ask you why do you coach, you'll give me some kind of surface level answer of you're good at it or you want to make a difference or whatever, right? But it's not really your why. Like trying to get to these kids, like, why do you play football? 90% of them would tell you just, I'm good at it, that's why I play football,
Right.
and so like I asked three questions to kind of really dig into the core of people, and the first question is always, if you weren't a football player, golfer, tennis, whatever, like what would you do? And so if this was taken away from you, And, most of the time they've never thought about their mortality in the sport. Like football is just going to be what they do forever. Right. And they
Right.
haven't really thought about like, and so then you start to kind of get like, oh, I'm going to go start a gym in my hometown, or I'm going to go be a police officer, or I'm going to go do this. And you're like, then you start to ask like, why would you do that? And you get some good answers. Um, and it helps you kind of, you know, be able to draw upon that. If they're like, oh, I'm going to go run a company. Okay, well, when they're sitting there and they're acting like a jackass on the squat, and they're dancing at the water cooler or whatever, you can be like, hey, look, like, is the president of freaking Sprint, are they going to would they be doing what you're doing right now? And it's another way to come at it without having to get in their face and scream and yell and posture and all those types of things. And you're reminding them of what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it connects with them on a different level. The second question I'll ask is always, what's the most difficult thing you've ever been through? And we're all kind of a little bit of a product of our environment, and knowing the toughest things, connects you pretty quickly. And we had a player at South Florida that, all we knew about the player was that he was in foster care, but he lived with his grandma his last year, and we signed him and he was in our program, and that's all we pretty much knew about him. And it wasn't until I asked him that question did he tell me that, like, he watched his dad shoot his mom and then commit suicide right in front of him. And then he went into foster care, and his grandma got him out of foster care because all she saw was a paycheck of him going to college and potentially going to the NFL. And it wasn't like love necessarily, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And and so like you hear that, and this kid ends up going on, and he's a surgeon right now, which is incredible. Um, but like that kid, I'm not going to motivate that kid by fear. Like I'm not going to, oh, you better do this or else. Like who?
Right.
Right.
He's like, yeah, whatever, dude. I've seen the worst.
Yeah.
But like that kid needs a freaking hug every time he walks in the weight room.
Yeah.
And when you know that, and you can be that person for that guy, like it connects you on a deeper level. And then the third question I always ask is, who's the most influential person in your life? And they tell you grandma, pastor, coach, teacher, whatever, right? And then you get their number, and you're like, hey, look, I'm gonna call them. And you just take a couple different days on your way home from work, and you just make a few phone calls. And as humans, we're really good about telling people how much they mean to us, right? And so like when I call these coaches, teachers, parents, whatever, they always think that you're calling for something bad, right?
Right.
There's a coach calling, and when you tell them something good, and like how this kid's a stud, and you saw him freaking carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs for somebody, he must have learned that from somebody. He might have learned it from you, right? And oh, by the way, did you know that he says you're the most influential person in his life? Like it's a pretty powerful moment, right? There's, I mean, like 90% success rate of making those people cry, you know. And so we hang up the phone. What do you think those people do?
Yeah. Immediately call.
Circle back.
They call the
Yeah.
they call the kid, right? And so now you've got the most influential person in their life saying that this coach actually gives a shit about you, and is saying great things about you. And if you don't think that that brings power into the weight room, and that you're able to ask that kid to do more, you're crazy. Especially in the transactional world that we live in now.
Yeah.
And so like knowing those things, being able to push those buttons, like, hey man, like you've got bigger plans in life, you got bigger goals in life than this weight room. Like you're forming these habits right now, or like you've been through worse crap than this, or hey, do I need to call freaking grandma and tell them that you're acting like a jackass today? Like any one of those three become levers that you can kind of use without being like, you're a piece of crap, you're lazy, you're soft,
Right.
whatever else coach speak you want to give a kid, and
Yeah.
been able to really probably take, and the other part of that is like you might have like Jason. We had Jason for 18 months. Like you don't have the time to build this really, really
Sure.
deep relationship over 4 years, 5 years now. Like you got to do it quick, And so those questions have been a way for me to connect with players or kids on a faster level.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, turnabout's fair play. Who's your most? Or wait, no, wait. What's the way? What if not football? What would you do?
Yeah, how many
Yeah,
times have you been? How many times have you answered this?
well, it's good that you asked that because that is something that I fail to mention sometimes is that you have to model when you ask those questions, you have to model it.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to give them example. So like to answer your question, I answer it every single time.
Yeah.
And so if I wasn't football, then I would probably be in the military or police or some sort of team, something with bigger purpose than myself, type of environment. Most difficult thing I've ever been through is my brother was murdered,
Oh.
and I had to be the one to tell my mom, and so that was not easy,
Yeah.
and then the most influential person is my wife, and my mom being a close second.
Yeah.
So, I think those, and I think that's my goal in life has always been to be able to provide for my family in a different way than I was able to, the not, my kids would be raised differently than I was being raised, even though I was raised by an incredible woman and did everything she possibly could. I didn't want our kids, my wife, to go through the struggles,
Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that we went through.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up pretty hard. My wife grew up like not just without a lot of creature comforts, And we've talked a lot about how like we've got our own boys now, and they've grown up in a very different environment than I did. And I'm like, I feel good about it, and then I'm also like, what if this actually isn't that good, and I just don't know what good is, Like I grew up too much in the hole.
Right.
Yeah, but
How
better.
old are your kids?
Uh,
How old are your kids?
both of our boys are in the kind of the same age band between 9 and 13.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got a 9, 11, 13.
Yeah.
You got a 9 and a 13, or
All
9
right.
and a
9
13?
and 13. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here, I'll give you a great piece of advice. Well, two things. Um, One is make sure that they get to that 13-year-old age. Like our thing was always if they were in school and they were getting good grades and they were on sports, then we wouldn't make them have a job.
Yeah.
Yep.
They just had to do that. And that was a mistake. We should have made them have at least a summer job
Okay.
and have to have to report and work for a boss and have to interact with people, and then have at least one bill.
Okay.
Because if they don't, then they don't have any concept of money.
Yeah.
And it's like my kids, no concept of money, zero, and they're 24 and 22 now, and so I think that's a piece of advice. The second thing I would tell you is there's a great book. Um, it's Raising a Modern Day Knight, and it's a really basically the premise of the book is essentially to instead of like society marking when they become an adult, when they can drink for the first time or whatever, right? Like you mark it with ceremony that they've gone through these different stages, based off your family code. So first coming up with the family code, and then like back in the Middle Ages when you would go from squire to page to whatever junior knight to knight, like there was this, like it was marked with ceremony, and it was like your community and the people that raised you were saying like you've gone to that next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've celebrated that with occasion. So it's a great family parenting book that I think, because again, like if your home team's not right as a coach, like you have no shot at having a great team on
Right.
the field.
Yeah. Yeah. When my boys get asked those 3 questions, I don't want to be one of the answers of
That's right.
the hardest
most
thing,
difficult thing you've ever
that they
done.
went through.
I like that those questions
Yeah.
kind of are like Oreo. You start out kind of good, and then it gets really rough in the middle, and then it gets good again. Like it's a real roller coaster to go through those 3 questions with somebody.
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, like 15 minutes, somebody on a deeper level than a lot of times coaches that have been recruiting them for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that. what the calling them also does is those kids, especially at that level, Division One, have probably had many adults come in, ask them a lot of the same questions
Mm-hmm.
for their own gain. And kids probably start to get used to that. Like, we want you to come to our school, sure, because we want you, but because I want to be a successful coach. Where then you calling them shows them probably for the first time, like, oh, that wasn't just a random questionnaire. Like, that coach actually then did something with the knowledge.